Have you ever had the feeling of being lost in game or mind blanking during specific moments of the round? With my new Game Sense series, I'll be talking about the macro aspect of improving game sense, which is subconscious map state reading. Knowing the likelihood of what the enemy as a whole is going to do will save you from using crucial utility and help direct you into high probability positions that give your team the edge. Regardless of role, this is an important topic for every single player. Small details like using a server dart when the enemies are clearly still in that area, or being overly passive in situations where you can make high probability plays based off stuff happening on the map. Things like this can significantly impact the odds of winning a round. First, we'll talk about the macro aspect, which is an overall judgment of how to position yourself at every point of the round. This is important because having a good subconscious clock of enemy macro movements can give you a head start on rotations or help you catch timing peaks or pushes that enemies complain about all the time. From a defender's perspective, map sounds, mini-map indicators, and teammate comms will reveal the likely spread and positioning of the enemy agents from the very first second of the round. I'll divide the round into 3 sections and explain the thought processes behind when to do things and how to position yourself. Finally, I'll go through a full round example. Let's use Sunset as an example. At the start of the round, depending on composition, if the enemy wants to successfully take A, they would have to commit a lot of resources. Instantly off the barrier, when they use utility, you should already have a subconscious idea of where enemies could potentially be. If a lot of utility is committed towards A, let's say at least 3 agents, then based on spawn barriers, the 2 agents who didn't use utility can only be in certain spots on the map. If you can make these kinds of calculated guesses every round, you'll naturally be more confident in your peaks into angles, especially when pushing or catching timings, which is arguably the most important part of taking a fight. Finally, do it enough and it will reach to your subconsciousness, then all of your attention can be on your crosshair on the positions they can be in. Moving into the mid round, let's say they didn't instantly rush A, but instead took elbow and went quiet. When teams rush, it's one fluid movement. They take the first area of contention and then immediately commit through the chokes before enemies can rotate in time, with the exception of ult usage, of course. When a team takes space, then slows down, that's when your macro timings can shine. Let's say they take A with the intention of faking control, and then want to rotate back to B. Depending on how far they took elbow, how long does it take for them to shift walk back to a spot where we won't hear them and then run towards B? That set amount of time gives you a window where you know the enemies are still most likely there. Once that time has passed, we should definitely immediately consider re-clearing the area they took to confirm information. If we use utility and they've all rotated back, we instantly turn our attention towards other sides of the map where we don't have deep information, since alert could have made progress. Finally, we reach the late round. If the attackers haven't already hit a site, they must be making a final decision on where to go, usually around the 35 to 50 second mark. Decisions here are heavily influenced by the map control you have and how the round developed from the early to mid round. If you as a defender have no lane control anywhere, attackers can run any fake they want and the likelihood of winning the round is low. Realistically, at this stage, you need at least one of the 3 lanes to be yours. If you have solid information on one lane, all it takes is a single piece of info utility or an info peek on another lane to deduce the final lane the enemy is going to hit. It's also important to recognize the potential for enemy lurks to be in specific positions that enable fakes or rotation. If they pressured part of the map and then went quiet and you have a lane with no information, stay open to the possibility of a lurk and be prepared to predict a fake into ending back to that lurk site. Here's a full round example from start to finish. So at the start of the round, if the enemy didn't use utility anywhere or very minimal utility, the enemies can only be doing 2 things: holding default for anti-aggression or contacting an area where we don't have initial control due to spawn barriers. The risk of making a play here is much higher than waiting for confirmed information on enemy positions. This is because if they're holding default, you risk getting re-cleared at any point in time, and if they're contacting up, you risk peeking into multiple players. So unless you have a get out of jail free ability, I'll be wary of pushing here. But let's say at the start of the round, they heavily use utility towards A. One of your teammates leans A, creating a stack, and let's say you are a B player. Depending on where the enemy Cypher places his camera on attack, you now have info on 4 players, at least 3 A, and Cypher around right side, bottom mid due to cam, and Omen is the only unknown. There's a high likelihood Omen isn't doing anything aggressive due to poor risk reward based on his role, so he's either with the group or holding another lane passively. So you can look to push one of these lanes for a drop off or to take a 1v1 duel. With mental notes of where enemies can be, you'll have more confidence in the swing. If you kill him, you know you can't be traded because the main pack is at A. If he's not there, that's fine because you now have control of that lane. During the mid to late round. Let's say they take A and go quiet. Currently, you only have mid information. You tell your initiator to re-clear A after a set amount of time based on your subconscious internal clock of enemy macro movement. If they're still A, you maintain the A stack. But let's say they've left A. You now control 2 lanes, meaning they can either only go B or come back and re-clear mid. So you shift your A stack towards mid to help your mid drop off on command. This also means fast rotates towards B. The third option is, let's say they break the re-clear utility at A to make it seem like they're still A, but then instantly rotate. That's fine as well because you still have mid control. A deep area where you might hear accidental footsteps or catch enemies when they aren't clearing you meticulously, which gives you an advantage in fights. Finally, if you re-clear A and there's no one, but the enemy anticipates the rotate because they believe that we know no one's A, and then they choose to re-hit A again, that is fine also. Since you're grouped towards mid, it's an easy option to mid push as a group based off internal timings if they confirmed not going B or haven't re-cleared mid yet. The key takeaway for map state reading and rotational awareness is, based on where you are, always look for opportunities to give your team an advantage through information or kills. Most of the time, this comes from enemy map control, pattern recognition, or proactive plays depending on your role. Examples include getting early info that they're splitting, then you can hold an off angle for the second tempo player during a split, or preemptively punishing them with utility. Second example is, if enemies go quiet and you're on the site they pressured, proactively re-clear based on your internal clock. Being one step ahead on information puts you and your team in better positions for high EV opportunities. The worst thing in this game is getting dragged around the map like clueless ragdolls, leaving the entire map open as defenders while rotating back and forth through CT. The second part of this video is on calculated assumptions of enemy start of round macro. So here we talk a bit more about psychology, what happened in the previous rounds, and we'll include some ults as well. So the first example would be, let's say as a defender, you punish them hard last round and you completely lock down a side hit or you lock down a first area of contention. Players naturally avoid repeating something that felt terrible. Now there's a high likelihood in the next round they go to the other side. Psychologically, enemies don't want to repeat a complete shutdown hit. Even in tier 1 play, you'll see straight AB starts. This is legit the first tier 1 bind VOD I clicked on VLR. The first round, A was complete shutdown. Next round, they go B. Round after, it's gun round versus gun round. Light shutdown B. Next round, rush A short. Rush A short was completely shut down. Next round, no more A short. Genji looked to take shower, explore other lanes as mentioned. And at 4-1, it was complete shutdown at A. Couldn't take any space. Ends up saving. Next round, they literally just rush B. So calculate where your weak areas are, where you've been shutting them down. There's only so many things they can do now. They have your trap set up where you think they will go. I promise you can snowball so many rounds like this. Second example is you punish them last round, but it was relatively close. The enemy feels the round was almost good enough, which creates recency bias and confidence in specific areas for them. So as a defender, you can look for exploitable areas in your defense. For example, you locked down A last round. Even if you held down A, showers will still be in the back of their minds the next round as an exploitable and weak part of the map. Whether they take showers and go A again or take showers and rotate B, refer back to macro timings and re-clears to read their intent. Third example is enemy won the last attack round. This is where expectation of counter adaptation comes in for them. It's crucial to understand utility and timing discrepancies for potential fakes. They rushed A and won, they may expect reinforced defense next round on A. They could potentially use precursor utility to bait fast rotations and go back to B. To compare whether the movement is one fluid motion or has timing inconsistency. These differences must be communicated to the team. Now we'll talk about 2 ult examples. Let's say the enemy has strong ults and look to use them in high win rate areas. This introduces commitment psychology. For example, Killjoy ult on Haven has higher win rates on A, so you can lean towards the assumption that they'll start A or they'll pressure another area to pull rotations before ending A with a Killjoy ult mid to late round. The key is agreeing on the likely end goal of where they most likely want to hit, so it's only a matter of when they'll do it. That way, it can put your team at a massive advantage of knowing when to do specific things and make plays. Final example is, let's say you have a strong ult and through long-term conditioning, your ult has a higher win rate in a specific area as well. So let's say you have several, enemies may avoid common server A ult starts or tight corridors like garage. This can be exploited because you have a calculated assumption of their start round positioning and likely plan, allowing you and your team to set up proactive plays. In the next video, I'll do a quick analysis on Reyna on split using EDG 27's gameplay as an example.